Now, wasn't that an all-time classic Formula One race? Hey guys, welcome to the WTF1 Wrap. This is our post-race show. I am your host, Dre Harrison. Glad you could join us on this Sunday afternoon. And yeah, I know you guys are all thoroughly captivated by that one. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. But we'll try to talk about what went down over the next half an hour or so. But with me, I've got a very special guest. You might know him from the world of sports cars, endurance racing, GT racing. He's done a whole heap all over the place. We've got Oli Webb with us. Hello, Oli. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, great honor to have you on the show. It's one of the coolest parts of the job, getting to meet everybody from the world of racing, coming out of nowhere. But I mean, Ollie, let us know, where are you right now, and what are you doing racing-wise at the moment?
So currently in Dubai, but I'm flying back for the Silverstone 500 next week. So this year I'll be doing British GT with McLaren in the GT3, McLaren Trophy Series. Some classic stuff which has been fun the last couple of years in Peter Auto, some old Group C's and a few bits and bobs as well, and hopefully the second half of the WEC Championship. So yeah, bit of GTs, bit of sports cars, bit of prototypes.
Great. I mean, I must admit, I am a newer sports car fan myself. I've only just started watching like the WEC and IMSA a little bit in the last year or so. Great racing, I do have to say. I know it's in endurance, and I saw some people turn their noses up at like endurance racing, but it's an incredible spectacle, isn't it, Ollie? I mean, like...
Yeah, and they're doing a great job of making it more widely interesting to the public because, of course, their shortest race is 6 hours, which is incredibly long. So it is hard to make it captivating. But with this new era coming back with all these manufacturers, it's hopefully a bright future for it.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of how this hypercar class develops, how the prototypes are going down in IMSA as well. Really looking forward to seeing how that goes. But I mean, Ollie, you watched this race along with us as well. Let's be honest with ourselves here. Not exactly what you call the most captivating Grand Prix in the world. Let's be frank.
No, it's not, is it? I mean, obviously, you kind of rely on the Baku DRS zones, and well, certainly in Formula 2, maybe the lack of grip of the tyres, but with F1 still having some decent amount of heat in their tyres, they all just kind of got along with their job almost too professionally.
I mean, I don't know if you saw the F2 sprint race yesterday, but that final restart, we had 6 cars into the fence at that final restart at turn 1. That was wild to say the least, wasn't it?
Mental, absolutely. When does F1 have that? Because they're going to join with having no tyre heaters, or that's their plan, right?
I think they're certainly the plan. They're going to eventually get rid of tyre blankets and just let them go. I'm not sure that's the best of ideas, personally, for safety reasons. I mean, speaking of safety reasons as well, Ollie. I mean, did you see the end of that race and the fact that Ocon had to stop him? We almost got multiple photographers run over. That was wild.
Just seeing the photo of them all lined up and this car coming into pit lane, then they're all probably looking at their sheets thinking, did he finish third, second, or oh no, he's pitting.
Shoot, get out of the way. It was a wild spectacle. I mean, for those who didn't see it, Esteban Ocon, who was going to stretch out his original set of tyres as long as he could, hoping there was going to be a late safety car and maybe find a way to keep his position, had to come into the pits on the final lap of the race, and the organisers had already let the photographers join the Parc Ferme area, which is at the front of the pit lane, and Ocon nearly run them over. He had to lift. He admitted to the press afterwards he had to lift off because there were people in the middle of the road. It's not the first time this has happened. It's happened in Australia last year as well with Alex Albon. So not what you'd call a good look for anybody involved in a series that's so built on safety, Ollie.
No. I mean, they're trying to be over prepared, but obviously you've got to wait until the race finishes.
I mean, I don't mind the track invasion and I don't mind setting up, but just tell them to do their in-laps a little bit slower and give it a bit more time after the race is over. Like when you know the pit lane is closed. I mean, it just seems needlessly unnecessary to me. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, fair to say.
Yeah. Also, one more thing I wanted to ask as well, because I've asked everybody that's come on the show this weekend about the sprint mode or sprint weekend changes. We got the shootout now on a Saturday afternoon, even less practice time, just the one for the weekend, and moving that usual conventional qualifying session to Friday. What have you made of the changes? Are you a fan of the sprint format in general now?
I think I'm a fan of most of it. I mean, I like less practice time. I think that is good because I think even the most devout F1 fan, I mean, I watch the highlights of all three practices, and sometimes I'll watch a practice 3 in full. But to watch all 3 in full, especially when you get to the point where you've watched them enough, you know the routines of when they're doing their quali laps, when they're doing their race sims, when they're full fuel, low fuel, it becomes a bit long and dragged. And I don't know if there's a balance between keeping it so that there's just an FP1, and then maybe people complain in other championship about these kind of reverse grid style races.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a system where they can have it so it's only FP1 and there's a shorter FP2 for anyone who's in the bottom half of the grid or something like that. And then they get more practice time to develop the car. And then if you start creeping up into the top 10, you're not allowed to have that extra practice session. I'm not 100% on the extra race that then doesn't actually mean anything other than a few points here or there. But I do like just one practice session. I think that is good.
Yeah. Certainly caught a lot of people out. I mean, we only had about 45 minutes back because that was also Pierre Gasly's car catching fire in that, and that was a good 13-15 minute red flag. So there was 45 minutes of practice run, and it did have an impact because you could see that the tyre wear was a lot worse than I think people were anticipating, especially in the sprint, because we had guys try the soft tyres and they were lasting 7 laps in a 17-lap sprint, which was a bit wild, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's no doubt that the teams probably hate this format. It's just as flat out, but even more, when they're trying to fix Gasly's car and get it out, and then it breaks it again, and then you've got to fix it again, and obviously that is a tough weekend to then recover from, and it just compounds for those teams. That makes it really tough.
Indeed, absolutely difficult one. Now, let's get into some of the winners and losers of the Grand Prix. We're going to go up and down the grid, side to side, and we're going to talk a little bit about their races. We're going to say whether they're going to be a winner or a loser based on their weekend in general. Let's get into it. The first one on my list this time around is McLaren. McLaren, they got a couple of points. Lando Norris in 9th, Oscar Piastri just outside in 11th. They're in that, I like to call that tight little queue we had. I call it the Ocon conga line, where he was refusing to stop on the hard and then no one could get around him because it seemed like it was quite tricky to pass. But I think given their struggles, Ollie, this season, and given the fact that they talked about Baku being around for upgrades, you take a couple of points, right? Is that a good weekend? I'd say so.
Yeah, I think so. And I think they've made some good progress that maybe they couldn't show as well at this track. And like you said, with that conga line and with that kind of train that they were in. I also think, excuse me, I think it would have been hard to tell the true pace if Norris was free to go and do, because I think he's still obviously got that edge. He pulled a couple of moves. I know Hulkenberg obviously made a mistake and he managed to get round, but he was still always there when he needed to pounce. So I think those improvements have helped, and I think they'll show even more as the races come on.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Baku isn't the most representative track in the world anyway. It's a bit of an outlier compared to most tracks on the calendar. So we'll have to wait and see. I think we got Miami next. That's a bit more conventional. So I think we'll have to see if that holds up. But I still think a couple of points, given how tight that lower midfield fight is still probably a positive weekend for McLaren overall. I think that's a W for them on that one. Mike in the chat agreeing, saying McLaren could take them or leave them, but with this result, it's a W. I agree with you, my friend. I think that's certainly a W for them in 9th place. I think there's still more to come from McLaren, but maybe 5th might be their aim again for the constructors. I think it's a very tight midfield fight. I think Alpine might be another fight for them this season. We'll get to them shortly, because safe to say, I don't think there'll be a W coming their way. Just throwing that one out there. Would you look at that? Who's next on my list? It's Alpine. Who would have guessed? I would never. I don't know how on earth I managed to figure that one out. My bad. Wow. They tried, Alpine. They hyped up a big upgrade for this round. They were very bullish about this, saying this is going to be a definitive improvement, and this was going to be a big step up. And we joked about this during the practice, Ollie. Their weekend was horrible right from the start. I mean, practice, Pierre Gasly's car catching fire. I joked around that Gasly's announced a new pope with the amount of smoke coming out of the front of that air hole.
I mean, I always get nervous when teams are that confident announcing about their upgrades because that's when everyone else is bringing upgrades. So you've got to just assume that someone else is coming out with something as good as what you have. So you've got to kind of wait to see where you lie between before that happening. And clearly, from the word go, Gazzy wasn't able to show any of those upgrades pretty quickly. And yeah, 0 points all round is not helping them try and get that 5th place in the constructors, which they're probably going to be trying to fight for.
A couple of comments in the chat. Rehards Tuka saying, was the upgrade reduced tyre deck? Seemed to work. Yeah, I guess that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
You got to take some positives.
Less grip.
Less grip. Yeah, great. Yeah, it's a good sign when you got to take some positives from a walking disaster like that. Jason saying, I would have given them an L, but it caught fire. Which, yeah, again, they also fit. Like I said, back from the start, Gasly's car caught fire. He wasn't particularly competitive in the race, didn't qualify particularly well. I think he had to start in 17th. And then Ocon had big setup problems. I think it was his suspension, so they broke Parc Ferme and gave Ocon the pit lane start. And then the only way they were going to really get in the points was if they just ran them super late and just hope a safety car bails them out. And it just didn't happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, but they had to give it a try, so I totally understand what they were trying, but hopefully they can go away and come back with something, because maybe there is an underlying benefit they clearly think there is. They just need to try and activate that, and if it's been underlined by issues, obviously with fire and crash damage and then suspension issues for Ocon, and, it's just a bit of a snowball effect then, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so. And Airflow catching up in the chat saying, what about the Ocon last pit stop with the photographer's FIA mistake? Yes, it was, Airflow, because there was this hilarious scene where it's like that meme of the guy pointing to himself in the mirror, where it's like the FIA was investigating themselves for what had gone down by having their representatives in the steward's office.
It's not a good look.
Yeah, there was a statement about that I saw a moment ago. In fact, I think I've actually got it in front of me. I'll read that out real quick. Now, we're in the Alpine section, so I guess now's as good a time as any. That is the reasoned decision from the steward said, quote, the stewards heard from the FIA representatives and determined that the relevant representatives took steps to set up the Parc Ferme area and also permitted media and other personnel to gather in the start of the pit lane and pit wall during the last lap, while the pit lane was open and before the final stop of Ocon, car number 31. We noted that it was not unusual for the representatives to allow people into the pit lane just before the end of a race, in the usual course of preparation for Parc Ferme and the podium ceremony. However, in this case, there was one driver that had to pit in the last lap, and this created a dangerous situation for those that were in the pit lane at the time. We considered that it was fortunate that there was no serious consequences of what happened today. We stressed that the requirements of ensuring a safe and orderly event are paramount. This was acknowledged by the FIA team. We walked through the relevant procedures and protocol with the FIA representatives in detail and required them to take immediate steps to reconsider these procedures and protocols with the relevant stakeholders, including the FOM, the teams, and the FIA, to ensure that this situation does not happen again. The representatives expressed their regret at what happened and assured us that they would do so in time for the next event. Well, that's a quick turnaround because we got Miami next week. So they better bash their heads together.
Don't go to the pits that early.
Yeah, basically. In other words, you've all been very naughty people. Don't let them out of the pit lane early. You could see the race situation. You knew a car still had to stop. Don't do it again. Basically. So, yeah, the FIA basically held their hands up and said, yeah, this is kind of our fault, really. And they...
Yeah, got no option there.
Yeah, I love the idea that the stewards, that those party that everybody loves in Formula One, was out here rightfully giving a lecture on the situation. Rihard's in the chat saying, a bonus game for extra race points, photographer bowling, only joking because everybody was fine and well. I guess we can joke about it now a little bit, but yeah, thankfully no one was hurt. And if you want a little bit more about that, by the way, there's a new short up on the WTF1 YouTube channel where I talk a little bit about that situation itself. So do check that out after you're done here. Also, one more before I get into it. Jason in the chat also say 1031 is a US police code for crime in progress. A fitting summary for the Alpine week, given 1031 is the two Alpine's driver numbers.
Oh god.
Very good, Jason. Very good. I think it's fair to say that's going to be an L for them on that one. We got Mercedes next up on my list. Now, the Mercedes are an interesting one. Hamilton 6th in the end. George Russell in 8th. I mean, Russell got the fastest lap at the end as well, going for a fastest lap attempt, so he got a little bonus point there for that to take off the Red Bull, so that's a little bit useful. But does that feel a little bit below par for Mercedes, given that Russell was fourth in the sprint?
Yeah, I'd say until that point in the weekend, I probably would have given them a win. I think they were doing pretty well, pretty strong, able to pull off some good moves. But yeah, it just didn't come to fruition in the main race, in the Sunday's race. So I think being able to, I mean, it doesn't feel like a lose either. I mean, they're there, they're where they need to be, and it's just funny now in our mind how we just see Aston Martin just as normal being where they are, in the place of where normally Mercedes would be.
Right, absolutely. No, like I mentioned this on yesterday's show with Pond, and I made the point that for Aston Martin, finishing like 6th and 8th in the sprint was actually probably slightly disappointing. Like in February, you probably would have taken that for Aston Martin hands down. But now, knowing that they're second in the Constructors' Championship but have actually got a genuinely quick car, it actually feels slightly disappointing. It's a weird sort of vibe now, but I mean, it looks like Mercedes are kind of now stuck in this fight for second with Ferrari, who had a pretty good weekend. We'll get to them in a bit. And Aston Martin, who was solid again as well. I think Merckx came out the third out of that three-way team scrap. So this might actually be a loss for Mercedes on this one. I don't know how you feel about it, Ollie.
I think if we're taking into account today how it is, and obviously, like you said, the people that are around them, then compared to the people they need to be beating and they expect to be beating, then yeah, if they're losing to them, you know, you don't want to be classed as the best of the midfield. What do they want to be classed as? They want to be classed as losing as the top of the field, which is where we're putting them, aren't we? So we should probably put them as an L.
Yeah, I think it is a small one on this one. That's really unfortunate for them. I mean, Hamilton spent 2/3 of that race stuck behind Carlos Sainz, just could not find a way around him. And yeah, I think they were caught a little bit napping on the restarts in general. I mean, Russell complained about it on the radio as well. That one restart we had after the safety car, and he was caught, and he couldn't recover from that 8th place in the end. It's a really unfortunate one. I'd say that's probably a small loss for Mercedes, which is a weird thing to describe them as, but they are going to be I think they're going to be in an upper midfield dogfight with Ferrari and Aston Martin the whole way through, which is going to be fascinating to keep an eye on as the season goes on. We've got our friends at Haas next, well, they tried. I think this is another one of those they sort of tried moments. I mean, Hulkenberg had to take a pit lane start in the end. That they wanted to change some setup issues, so they broke Parc Fermé and again had to start from pit lane. And they tried, and again, they tried to run it as long as they could, hoping for a second safety car. It just didn't arrive, and Hulkenberg ended up a lap down in 17th, K-Mag in 13th. I mean, coming off the highs of a 7th place in Australia, that's got to be a small L for Haas, right, Ollie?
I know, it's got to be. I mean, they do this a lot, don't they? They start the season really strong. It's kind of a bit of a known thing for them, and now kind of fading into the background again a little bit. A couple of good moves that you see that pull off, but, you know, these are the same moves that they were pulling off, like you said, for points, and now they're just being pulled off in the back of the midfield to the back of the field. So it can't be seen as anything but a bit of a loss.
Yeah, whoops, my Discord went off there a little bit. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, Jason in the chat saying quite right, an attempt was made and we love Gunther, but that's an L. I'm inclined to agree. This is a team that I think they can compete for points. We've seen it a couple of times. I know Magnussen and Jeddah, he was competing with Tsunoda for that final point for 10th, and then again, Hulkenberg. If that red flag didn't go the other way, we're talking about a potential Hulkenberg podium at last after what was it, something like 170 starts or something?
God, that would have been amazing.
Or something silly like that. I mean, it's still a good weekend to have a 7th there, and yes. I was very lucky to speak to Gunther about it last week, and he was delighted at Hulkenberg's progress so far this season. But I think that's still probably a small L for Haas on this one. I think they've got a little bit more in them than this weekend showed, but I think their car being a bit draggy probably let them down. Williams is next up. Williams, I thought they'd be a bit stronger in this race, actually. Albon was 12th. Logan Sargent was down in 16th. He mentioned, he missed out due to the sprint shootout, and he missed out altogether due to a damaged car in the shootout. So he missed the sprint. So repair bills and a car that wasn't massively quick. I mean, I don't know if you how much you see it, Ollie, but I think you might know that Williams has this knack of being really fast in a straight line, very slippery. You'd think this sort of track would suit them.
It looked like it was going to suit them at the start of the weekend, and especially in the first half of all the qualies, it was right there, and Albon at least was right there, and it was looking, he's going to kind of pull it out of the bag here. But the DRS DRS is 100 meters shorter, is it?
It was,
than previous years.
So
maybe that didn't help. It
Yeah.
seems to certainly be a quick car, but it needs the DRS open to really work that out. Whereas the Red Bull is just quick with or without DRS open. I mean, they could probably just keep it closed and still overtake.
Yeah, just dump the whole battery. They'll be fine. No need. I mean, we saw that in the restart. Verstappen passed Leclerc after the safety car into turn 3 and was quickly dispatched. So yeah, I think the 100 meters less of DRS, I think, actually played a bigger role than I think a lot of people were anticipating, because we were limited for overtakes. I mean, one of the highlight reels was Logan Sargent getting passed by Pierre Gasly I think it was for 16th towards the back of the field. So not great for Williams, and I think this was actually quite a disappointing weekend for them. I thought they had a shot at points here.
I think they were thinking the same.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that's actually probably, again, another L for Williams on that one. A couple of guys in the chat saying, yeah, Mike, Williams fell behind hard during the race. That's an L from me. Yep, I'm inclined to agree with you, Mike, again. I'd say so as well. Next up on the list is Ferrari, and yeah, I'd say this was a good weekend for Ferrari. There was no haunt jokes that could be made about the prancing horse being bad. Leclerc fought hard, got on the podium, held off Alonso right at the end because Alonso was coming in quick. Right at the end of that race, Sainz held off Hamilton for a good 2/3 of the race. So I think 3rd and 5th, given how much noise and bad vibes have been around Ferrari so far this season, I think that's a plus. I think you take that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a win. I mean, and obviously, Leclerc with his qualifying skills and doing what he does best around there, and the fact that they were able to have no strategy errors was quite a nice clean week for them. I mean, maybe there was not much strategy to be had.
Well, I mean, it helps when the hard tyre can do 80%, if not the entire race distance, as we saw from Hulkenberg and Ocon. Reasonably
smooth,
well.
Isn't it? That track, it's just, I mean, you could just glide round on it. It's unbelievable how smooth it is, and they're just creating so much surface temperature. It's funny because it just destroys the soft, but then the hard lasts forever. Yeah, so it was really interesting actually from Pirelli's side, probably how they had to make those tyres work.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Yeah, the softs were barely lasting 7 or 8 laps in the sprint, but yet the hards were going 35, 40, 45 plus laps, and it wasn't a problem. And these are the softest tyres they brought to this weekend as well. They went in the C345 setup for this weekend. They were limited for tyres. They only brought 12 sets for the whole weekend, and yet the hards were just rock solid, lasted the whole way through in the end. And yeah, the chat agreed with you, Ollie, 100%, where there was no silly risks. There was nothing they could mess up. It was a basic one-stopper. There was nothing for them to really mess up. So I agree. I think this is a W for them. And I love that Jason in the chat says, feels weird to give them a W, given that's another Chuck pole that's not converted into a win. Yeah, that is true. I think it's the 8th time now in a row that Leclerc's qualified on pole and not converted it into a win. But given what we know about Ferrari and the state of Red Bull, I think it's fair to give him a W, and I think the chat's agreeing. Yeah, feels weird to go W for Ferrari for a 3-5, but it is. I mean, given where they've been this season, I think that's a good result.
I think so, and I think it's tough for I think it's easier for Leclerc to give it to Verstappen over one lap, but as soon as that Red Bull has a bit of a toe and it's in a train, if it's ever behind anyone, it's just so quick in the straights that the deficit between the two is greater in the race than it is in qualifying.
100%. I'm with you on that one. Next up on the list is Alpha Tauri, and this is certainly a tale of two races, because Yuki Tsunoda, I've joked for a little while on this show, is fighting and scratching for everything he can get. His 4 races so far this season, 11th, 11th, 10th, and 10th. He is scrapping for every little morsel that Alpha Tauri gives him, and he got another point again today, a hard-earned 10th place, just ahead of Oscar Piastri, so he got a point. Nick de Vries, on the other hand, oh dear. He's had the weekend from hell. Out-qualified, put his teammate in the wall during the sprint, which ruined Tsunoda's race, and then he's crashed again during the race itself, and he was a DNF on the day, first man out, and I mean, Ollie, it's a very polarizing sort of vibe at AlphaTauri at the moment.
Yeah, I would not like to be in the debrief room for Nick in these evenings. I mean, that is so tough. And also, it's a bit of a spiral as a driver. You really kind of struggle to kind of set your mindset, and vice versa. Tsunoda, he's obviously, his mindset now is, you know, we've all seen from kind of Drive to Survive and day to day what he's like. You know, he's a very chilled out character who doesn't seem to, at least on the face of it, in inverted commas, care as much as the others about the way he acts and what he puts in. But I think, you know, he's really behind the scenes on a roll.
Absolutely.
And it's harder to be, I think it's much harder this year, or at least in the last couple of years, than in previous years, to be getting those 9th and 10th points, because there is a lot more teams available to get those points when they're available. And you know, to be getting these 1 points, it's way more deserved than it's been in the past. So he's, you know, from his side of the garage, it's definitely a win, but there's a very large L on the other side.
Yeah, it's like do we kind of balance this out? I mean, I'm not sure. We might have to call this one a wash, because Tsunoda getting a point is big, and I don't think that AlphaTauri is a particularly quick car at all. But Yuki is giving them everything they can get out of that car every week so far this season. I think he's been very, very good. And Nick might be in some trouble. We all know Red Bull are very ruthless when it comes to its drivers and how they go about themselves. They've got a fleet of juniors beneath them. I mean, I joked that Liam Lawson might be on the first flight out of Tokyo after this weekend has finished, given how he's doing quite well in Super Formula, and then Ayumu Iwasa had a bit of a rough weekend this week in Formula 2, but was leading the championship going into this round. So there's pressure on Nick de Vries if he wants to be more than just a one-and-done driver in the series, because Red Bull have stashed the academy up again. They've got plenty of talent they could lean on if need be, unlike last year. So I'm going to call this one a wash. I'm going to call this one a neutral, maybe even a W, because they still got a point, and ultimately that's what matters most. They got a point, and that's a big point. They've doubled their haul for the season, so they'll take that absolutely, even if they have to pay $5,000 to the FIA after that crabbing incident after the sprint. Guys, stop releasing Yuki Tsunoda in an unsafe condition. It's not funny anymore, okay? It's a bit silly. 3 teams to go. We call to talk a little bit about Red Bull here, and stop me if you've heard this one before. It was a Red Bull 1-2 finish. I know you're all shocked. We can't not call it a W, Ollie. It was almost like clockwork for Red Bull, really, on the end. I mean, the only real issue was the call to pit Max under the safety car, or the safety car that wasn't until it was, with that incident early on, because I think Max might have been a bit peeved off about that decision.
Yeah, I'm surprised. On the one hand, I'm surprised that they did it. On the other hand, I feel like they're so confident in their car that they can take these risks to know that, oh, okay, if it goes wrong, he'll finish second. And, you know, that's the worst that'll happen. Whereas if it goes right, then, you know, we've done the right thing and everyone else is screwed. So I think it also for them looks really good, maybe politically, that, you know, it's the start of the season. There's no one favorite driver on paper. So to have win-win second, and it to look that even means they've always got something really nice to fall back on if kind of these talks come out again where they're always asking, let's say, Sergio to move over, because, you know, at least they can say, oh, at the start of the year, you know, Sergio won just as many as Max did. So I quite like that they're close. When I saw the championship results at the end, you know, when the graphics come up, I'm like, oh, quite close, actually. You know, it's quite nice to see. Yeah.
Yep, 6 points for him, and that was with Perez having a pretty awful Australia when he was only 5th on the day, and despite being in the best car, and there's only 6 points between them, and yeah, like it's like, look, this might be our only hope for a captivating season. Okay, we got to hold on to some degree of hope here. Okay, please give us something. Okay, please. Look, no fault of Sergio Perez. He drove an excellent race, did what he had to do, and kept Max behind him. Max was never really close enough to give him a serious fight for the win again. It was very Jeddah-like, where, only difference is Max had to come through the field in that one. But yeah, I mean, Perez, if he can hold his own and hold up his end of the deal, everyone's gonna be happy at Red Bull, right? We might even get a title fight.
Well, let's hopefully he just wins every street circuit for the rest of the year. That'd be great.
the self-nicknamed Street King with his sixth win on a street track now. So yeah, maybe there is something to the whole Sergio Perez as a street circuit guy. Or maybe Max is just playing it down because he knows he might have something in hand for some of the other tracks, because I think he'll be a bit disappointed given how much he dominated this race last year, and this year he didn't really have an answer for Checo on the day. But who cares? 1-2 finish. Sprint was fine. Everything's golden. Yeah, it's an obvious W for Red Bull. It's going to take a lot for them not to be the way this is going so far this season. On the other end of the scale, we've also got Alfa Romeo, who I joked during yesterday's stream existed. They were here. We can confirm their attendance. And oh dear. Zhou had a technical problem. He couldn't finish the race. They had to pull him in early. And then Valtteri Bottas, who had a miserable time out there. I think he ended up coming through the pits 2 or 3 times in the end. No.
Was he a lap or 2 down? He was at least a lap down, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a lap down. I'm surprised it wasn't 2 actually. And Valtteri Bottas looks out of sorts at the moment. It's weird from him at the moment how, like, last year he dominated Zhou Guanyu, and I don't know how much of it is Zhou's been a bit better because he was running ahead of Valtteri when Zhou had the technical problem and they had to park him. But Bottas seems out of sorts, and Alfa Romeo might be the weakest team on the grid right now. They are struggling.
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, but it feels like yesterday Bottas was leaving Mercedes and coming to that team and rejuvenating it and right up there and like, oh wow, he's going to be a regular top 6, 7, 8 finisher, and then now I forget he's on the grid. It is painful for them. It is painful.
My theory on the podcast I've said on many a time was, like, I think Fred Vassar's plan when he was team boss last year was come in with a car that was right on the weight limit, on the minimum weight limit, have a lighter car, get some early points, and then ride out the pain afterwards. And I think that's what's happened, because second half of last year, they were pretty dreadful, and it looks like they've carried on that form into the start of this year. They had that 8th place in Bahrain with Bottas. It started out great, and then it's all gone downhill for them since then, and it's a shame. I mean, this is going to be the Audi team in less than 3 years' time. And I wonder how much Andreas Seidel is thinking we need some cash.
We've got to change this.
Get some money, because this is a team that looks like they need some work. So I think it's an obvious L for them. F1 Luke Sam, who was on our Friday show. Good to see you, Luke. Say Fred left and they've fallen apart. Andreas Seidel is a genuinely great team boss. I don't think he's the problem, but I certainly think they've inherited a bit of a donkey in terms of a car, which might be a problem. I've not seen as many L's in the chat that I've seen right now. It's not good. That's not ideal at all. And finally on our list is Aston Martin. And Aston Martin, another good weekend. Alonso, the first time he's not finished 3rd this season. He only had to settle for 4th.
Which is crazy to think.
I know. The old boy is still chugging along and doing excellent work, and Lance Stroll was 7th. I'm also going to give Alonso my MoneyGram send of the race for that overtake he had on Carlos Sainz after the restart. That was a beautiful pass.
But Stroll as well, like he was sending it as well after the restart, and it made me think, I wonder if they're activating their tyres better than everyone else, because they both did ascend within the first few corners. Both very, very impressive off the start and off that restart. And, Alonso's always been good at restarts and starts full stop, hasn't he? But to see Stroll doing it as well, I was thinking, that car really is working well. Like the old school days of Vettel, when he used to make that kind of 3-4 second lap lead immediately on the restart. It's awesome to see. They're definitely the most exciting team for me watching at the moment.
Oh yeah, they are fun. They are a fun team. We even had Alonso over the radio telling Lance Stroll, here, send him my brake balance, it'll help him. And I love that the timing of that radio message was just before Stroll went wide and was passed by George Russell. Russell a lap later. Luckily, Stroll got that 7th place back, which is quite funny in the end. But apparently I saw after the race that they hugged it out afterwards, and Stroll apparently didn't have a clue that Alonso had sent his brake balance information over to him, and Alonso said he wants to help Lance get better over the years because he knows his days are numbered as an F1 driver, which is very wholesome. I do like that vibe at Aston Martin right now. Alonso seems to have adopted some very generous spirit as he enters his 40s. So I think that's actually quite charming. So is it a W, 4th and 7th, given Aston Martin are maybe second best? That's interesting. That might actually be slightly disappointing for them, funnily enough.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, just because of how dominant, or not dominant, but how much more capable Ferrari were this weekend. They were in the positions that they should have always been. Therefore, maybe kind of, it's not that I think Aston lost this weekend. I think they just capitalized on all the opportunities they could do in the first few rounds, so that now maybe this is more of, I mean, really on paper it should be Red Bull, Ferrari, and then it seems Aston. So actually I think they're where they should be. I think we can't forget how amazing it is that, you know, he's finished 3rd in the first 3 races, but I don't think that's really where they are. I believe they're more in like 4th, 5th territory. If everything's going right. It just doesn't always go right, or hardly at all, for Ferrari, which is why they're always up there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think it's still a win, but I don't know what's the chat saying. What do they think?
The chat, they're calling it a wash. They're saying maybe a small W. Rihard's saying W for teamwork from Alonso. Yeah, I think we'll give him that. I think we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Even though the SHT put a good point in there, saying they did have a number of DRS issues, but they got it ironed out when it mattered most, I suppose. So I would say I'd lean towards giving them a win for that one. I think we're still riding the wave of Aston Martin just being refreshingly good at the moment, and I think we'll take that for at least a couple more rounds on that one. And that was the last team on our winners and losers edition of the WTF1 wrap. We are back next weekend for Miami. It's a back-to-back. It's a very busy period in general. We still have 4 more rounds over the next 5 weeks, and well, if I'm going to be honest, if you weren't a fan of this one, the fact that we've got Monaco, Canada, Imola, and Miami coming up next, it could be a bit of a grind, I'm not going to lie, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get a bit more action. Ollie, tell the good people where they can find you before we get out of here as well. Give yourself a shameless plug. I hope the WTF1 audience gives you a little perk up.
Thanks very much. Well, I'm next out at Silverstone next week for the British GT, Silverstone 500. But yeah, you can find me everywhere at Oliver James Webb on pretty much everything.
Brilliant. Give him a little WTF1 up bump from us, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed the Baku weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed the wrap-ups. And for all those guys who made jokes about Kylian Mbappe shirts, just thought I'd throw that one out there and lean into the bit a little bit. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I've been Dre Harrison. He's been Oli Webb. We'll catch you guys for the WTF1 wrap next week, coming from Miami. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Sayonara.